going up. Elevator systems. Bowen family systems theory in brief for a life of learning.
Welcome to Elevator Systems, the podcast where we take these big ideas from Bowen theory and do our best to present them in clear, understandable ways, give our elevator pitch for these ideas and what they look like in everyday life. And today's topic is togetherness. And I'm Dixie Vandersloos. I am a counselor and a member of the faculty at Living Systems in Vancouver. Katie White is with me each episode. She is the executive director and a couple and family therapist. And joining us today from Washington, D.C. is Kathleen Smith. Dr. Kathleen Smith, I should say. And she is a licensed therapist and writer. She has 2 books entitled Everything Isn't Terrible and the brand new True to You, A Therapist's Guide to Stop Pleasing Others and Start Being Yourself. Kathleen is an associate faculty member at the Bowen Center and the author of the newsletter, The Anxious Overachiever. And I will say your book is on my shelf right here. And when I pulled it out the other day, I realized it was like actually filthy, which I think speaks to how many times I refer to it and that I eat potato chips far too often when I read books. So it is a well-used resource and I greatly appreciate your writing. And
thank you. It's the highest praise imaginable.
The filthiest book on my shelf. So good. Well, our topic today is togetherness, which is maybe a term that people aren't super familiar with, but it is definitely a Bowen theory term. So I was wondering, Kathleen, if you would want to start us off with what would your elevator pitch of this big idea be?
Well, I tried to keep it as short as possible because I like a challenge. So literally all I wrote down when you told me to do this was do as I do or I'll do as you do. And those are the only 2 options.
Okay, say that once more.
Do as I do or I'll do as you do.
Right.
So beautiful. Look at that. Mine is almost probably the opposite of a lot more words, which probably speaks to me. Can I give it a go? We're in a time to see if I'm under 30 seconds. So I took it like the textbook more side, thinking of this emotional force that's inherent in all of us that drives us to be a part of a group. So I thought the best part to help people understand is how it's actually experienced in humans. So I thought this is experienced as when you feel like you belong, the feeling of love, attraction, the need for approval, also the fear of isolation and jealousy. And then I thought it would be important to note that some of us are more sensitive. I know we're going to talk about differentiation of self at some point. Some of us are more sensitive to this feeling of togetherness or when it's not there than others. And I think my final thought on togetherness is that if we have too much of it, too much of that, we can lose ourselves in it, which is probably where Kathleen's little succinct 2-sentence really summed up well.
Yeah.
There it is.
My pitch was togetherness is the human desire and drive to connect and be part of a group. It can be an adaptive, life-giving force because relationships provide humans with physical and emotional and social needs. And, like you said, Katie, there's a thing as too much togetherness when we conform and lose our thinking to the group think, or what I call doing gymnastics to fit in, which I've done a lot of relationship gymnastics in my life. In terms of what Bowen's words or pitch might be, he uses a lot of different terms for this idea. Emotional fusion, emotional connectedness, emotional stuck togetherness, ego fusion, undifferentiated family ego mass are all sort of terms that come along with this idea. One of the quotes from his book that I found was, "A relationship system is kept in equilibrium by 2 powerful emotional forces that balance each other. In periods of calm, the forces operate as a friendly team, largely out of sight. One One is the force for togetherness, powered by universal need for emotional closeness, love, and approval. The other is the force for individuality, powered by the drive to be a productive, autonomous individual as determined by self, rather than the dictates of the group. Then he says the automatic response to anxiety and discomfort is to strive for more togetherness. Or as he says in another part of the book, man needs human closeness, but he is allergic to too much of it. So that's a long elevator ride, that quote. But
I was just in Chicago. That's the one that's going all the way up, right? That huge building.
All the way to the top. What are some, words or ideas that stand out in kind of what we've all brought out here?
I think stuck togetherness is probably the one that I use the most frequently, or I'll use words like adjusting or accommodating. But I do like the gymnastics description, the sort of the contortion that happens in the face of pressure.
Yeah. I was looking at Ron Richardson's book recently, and he said, "Come close, but not too close." And I thought that was such a good kind of picture of the balance there. What is that? What is that space that's comfortable for each person?
Yeah. Well, and one of my questions for you two was the distinction between togetherness and fusion. Like, those are two terms, and I don't know how you would see them as similar or different, or what they each highlight. Pop quiz.
I know, that was a pop quiz.
I think it depends on who you ask. There's a lot of overlap in the definitions. I tend to think about togetherness more as sort of the system as a whole, and fusion sort of being in the one-to-one. But that doesn't have to be the case. But that's how I sort of hold it in my brain. I'm thinking about the fusion in relationships with particular individuals, and togetherness is more sort of about the stability of a system as a whole.
I was thinking of it in terms of intensity when you asked that question. That's what came to me. Like, togetherness is useful. It's not bad. It's a force that keeps us, part of a community and part of a family. And I think of fusion as when the intensity might get too much. I guess that's what kind of came to me when you asked that.
Yeah, I think they're both helpful distinctions. And I've appreciated the idea of more or less mature togetherness, that it can look differently. I don't know if anyone has thoughts on that. I know Barbara Lehman presented some great slides that I screenshotted at a Bowen conference recently on that idea. But
I think it's a difference. I think the intensity could be that difference between I need a partner or I'm not going to be okay, versus I really appreciate the value that this other person brings to my life.
Right.
I'm also thinking about sort of just to give sort of an example, I think of togetherness as sort of like the fuzzy feelings I get when we're all wearing matching t-shirts, right? And then the fusion is stopping my husband before he walks out the door if he's wearing something I think is slightly embarrassing, because I'm treating him as an extension of myself, right? It's sort of the same concept in some ways, but how it how it plays out can look a little bit different.
Yeah. Which speaks, I think, both to intensity and that a more one-to-one. Yeah. Well, let's jump into some examples. I have many. Maybe I'll do mine first. Though, like I said, probably every day I could give you multiple examples, but a humorous one was about a decade ago. We lived in a small town. It was small town kids soccer, and they needed parents to do these to coach a little bit. And so I took my week, even though I know almost nothing about soccer. And boy, I was so good at getting those kids to kind of do whatever on the field. And I could get them, which I guess is also part of togetherness. I hadn't thought of this in the context of this example, but I could really mobilize them to do these certain activities. But when it came time to, now we're going to split into teams, and I counted them off 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then like all these kids came towards me and said, no, I want to be on this person's team and I want to be on this person's team. I like completely disintegrated, and I just like tagged in another parent to come and help organize the teams, because I couldn't handle the pressure I was getting from these little 7-year-olds to do what they wanted. So that's me.
When I thought of my example, I took it out of humans, because sometimes that helps me really think about these ideas. And I was just back from vacation, so I have my vacation example where we went to an aquarium. And one of my favorite things in the world when I go to an aquarium is watching the school of fish and watching a togetherness force respond as a unit as they swim around, and just how sensitive they are. I'll watch a larger fish come towards this group and how they automatically respond and are communicating somehow between each other to change their path. So looking for, threats and opportunities, and just, I could watch it for hours, and it to me just lets me get curious about humans do that too. I know they do. And so when I'm, in my family, what is the subtle sense of danger or opportunity that I'm someone near me is responding, and it shows up in me. So I think that's the one that I just like to look for it in animals, to see how I can get a little more neutral about how this shows up in a human.
Right. Yeah. Kathleen, did you?
Yeah, Katie had the same idea I did. Not the fish, but going to the animal world. And actually I have an excerpt. Is it okay if I read?
Yeah.
I want to talk about locusts. Because they're just fascinating. And this is from a wonderful book by Ashley Ward. It's called The Social Lives of Animals. And he talks about how locusts, who are relatively antisocial, kind of become party animals when the togetherness switch kind of gets thrown. And so I love this excerpt from the book. This is kind of pieced together, but I'm going to read it really quick. So when food is scarce and the locusts sort of need to work together, there's this... they'll sort of have this forced march, right? And the locust behind you, if you're a locust, will rub against your hind legs, and it releases a flood of serotonin to course through the locust's body. And it's this that flips them the full 180 from recluse to party animal. The same chemical serotonin is, of course, also active in our own bodies. It's linked with reduced aggression and more constructive social behavior. And as more and more locusts join the party, all of them must march in the same direction. It's no time to be individualistic. Falling out of step or changing direction within the surrounding mass of hungry cannibals essentially means volunteering to be a snack. So if you're a locust and you don't keep moving, the locust behind you is literally going to chew your butt off, right? And I thought, what a great metaphor that is, right? And so but there are risks of starvation, right? So it's an incredibly useful adaptation. But the cost is you better move with the group, right? Or else you're going to be what they eat. And so I don't know about you guys, but I've certainly felt like that in various groups I've been a part of over the years. So, just recognizing how tremendously useful it is, but at the same time, it can be a cost to the individuals, right? And so I think that's just useful for me to remember, I think, because sometimes it's easy to be critical of togetherness and not see the larger function and how in times of challenge or crisis, it is sort of the best way forward. And so I love that example from this really well-written book that I wanted to share. So.
Never gonna look at Lucas the same again.
To highlight when it is useful and when it's less useful, like it reminded me, it was probably 20 years ago, I was at a cousin's wedding, and on my dad's side, and our family is, kind of spread across the country, so we're not together very often. And we were at the reception, and we're all sitting at this long table, And the chorus of this hymn that we all knew was coming to the chorus, and all I did was put my fingers in the center of the table and go like this, and we erupted in like 4-part harmony. These people who are never together, we just knew what to do, and it was sort of this fun little cute beautiful moment. So there's lots of ways that it's helpful or fun, and then less helpful. Yeah. What would you say is useful about the idea of togetherness as sort of an idea to keep top of mind in life for you or in your work with clients?
Well, I think, I'm an only child, and so I love kind of coasting alone to a large degree in my life, and I appreciate being continually reminded how much more groups can get done than individuals. And so part of my challenge and my work on myself is to be a part of that and look for opportunities for people who are solving problems. And appreciating both the usefulness of acting as one, but also kind of the boringness of acting as one, and how that challenge of differentiation of sort of, holding on to yourself while being a part of that collective effort. What a great dance that is. But it's easy to say, you know what, I think I'm just gonna hang out over here and do my own little thing. It's so tempting.
Yeah, I think I pull the other way. I always pull towards the more, maybe it's my sibling position, kind of bring the people close. But I took it to, I think as a clinician, it's always useful to me to think about togetherness and how interconnected we are. And, I was sitting just recently with a client, and I think this happens all the time, where they're sort of like, I'm feeling this sense of anxiety. I'm feeling this worry. I don't know where it's coming from. There's nothing in my life that I can really pin. And to open up the system larger and just ask about a family member or, a spouse or a child, and just to be interested in how, in this recent example, there was someone's, lost a job in their family, and they're talking to them about it, and to watch of how there can be that anxiety transfer, which can be useful to a system, right? An anxiety transfer to that other person about, oh, this isn't happening to me, but I'm worried about how this has happened. I think this happens on a societal level as well, how we can get real worried or feel the emotion of other groups. So as a clinician, I think it helps me get curious about the larger system. Yeah. And hopefully my clients sit in front of me too.
I would say for me, I like to think of it as sort of the glasses that I put on, and what do I automatically assume others are thinking, and what do I think, and whose glasses am I putting on in this moment? It's a way, it's kind of like a framework to keep in mind of where I go, because like I said, I will, without even thinking, just do the gymnastics of like just shifting my words just a little bit, or getting a little bit more excited, or sometimes I've even like, oh, this is extra embarrassing, like sort of dress at the sort of level that I know the person I'm going to be with is dressed, which, I don't know, when you're going to the opera or whatever, I guess there's like these sort of norms or customs, but there's a way that it's kind of losing myself or wanting to fit in a way that's less, I don't know, mature or authentic, or I don't know what words you guys would think of there.
Maybe borrowed.
Yeah, and I think that's the point of the question. I can think sometimes in my own day-to-day life when I'm struggling with something, and how quick I'll reach out to my siblings for their thinking before I've even paused and thought. And I think that's that force to kind of, what does the group think about this? So I can get a clearer idea of what I think. Maybe sometimes that's useful, maybe sometimes it's less useful.
What does the group think if it's a group of individuals who aren't thinking their own thoughts? Where does that come from? But
well, you've got, kind of the concept of swarm intelligence, right? That adage, like if you're trying to guess the number of jelly beans in a jar or something, you ask a bunch of people and then you get the average of those, or the median, I can't remember, of those answers, and it's probably going to be pretty close to the real one, right? So maybe the group actually is pretty smart and knows what it's doing a lot of the time.
Fair enough, yeah.
I work with a lot of younger people, and I see sometimes sort of the need for more togetherness in people's lives. There's fewer people participate in organized religion. They're not a part of social clubs, or sort of millennials and Gen Z in particular are notorious for not really being joiners. And then you've got somebody maybe who's working remotely, in their apartment. And there's not a lot of that in their day-to-day life other than maybe getting together with a couple of friends. And so how much of our own functioning, for better or worse, is being a part of something where you have that level of togetherness. And then if you take that away, people aren't functioning so well.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's what I appreciate about the idea of that feeling lonely is actually a biologically driven idea to connect us to other people. We need to be connected to other people. And I think, I'm blanking on the researcher's name who studies this, so maybe someone else could save me here, groupthink. But to think about how that's useful to us. Like, can loneliness be a question of, what do I need right now? Is there a way that I'm being, isolating that is useful, less useful than connecting with other people?
Are you thinking about is it Capiocho, or
yes,
is that how you're thinking about? I don't know how to pronounce it.
Capuccio is what I was thinking of. I'm not sure either of those are right. Yeah. Well, should we? The time does go by fast. We're at like the takeaway section already. My takeaway, and Kathleen, I don't know if you remember saying this, but on a podcast a few years ago, you did this quote, which I have quoted in many, many papers and many presentations. So we'll see if you remember it. Okay. We tend to think of mindfulness as a solo endeavor, but if you can't do it in challenging relationships, then what's the point? Do you remember saying that? I'm sure you've said versions of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
On Morra, Aarons-Mele, The Anxious Achiever.
Oh, yeah. No,
November 2021. How family dynamics play at work. And so what has struck me with that is, mindfulness is definitely a very popular sort of practice over, a long time, but especially the past few decades. And thinking about how I can just, have peace and clarity, sitting alone silently by myself in my house. And then when I get out into relationships, me disintegrating on the soccer field, right? And so what does it look like to take that clarity while in contact with people would be sort of my takeaway or challenge. Yeah. Other thoughts? Maybe I'm talking about the opposite of togetherness, but it's certainly related to togetherness.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about sort of the safe and easy ways of experiencing it that maybe aren't as I see it as sort of taking my medicine in a way. Like, how much of that do I need to have a certain kind of baseline of functioning, right? What's an opportunity to like the example you gave, Dixie, of like singing with people and how important that is for your brain, and it's really great. I mean, there's so many benefits, and you doing it in a group is even better, right? And so if it's singing with people or playing games, or like I'm thinking my daughter's softball team, they do these little cheers for each other, like just the importance of that kind of ritual in day-to-day life, and kind of not seeing it as good or bad, but just a piece of being human, and where are those opportunities, and how they can be important for life. And so I think that's kind of my assignment for myself, is to kind of be on the lookout for those things.
I guess I was thinking similar along the sides is my takeaway is observe, just get interested. That's what the takeaway for myself, and I often can do this so well around being one of 3 sisters, is to just be observant about when I can hold a thought, when I can reach out to others, when do I feel calmed by, my sisters saying, yeah, that does suck, to think about how this interconnectedness is useful, and when I could benefit a little bit by pausing before jumping into being a part of the group. So I just think of that pause. I think I'm going to say that about 1 billion times throughout this podcast. It's just that pause that allows me to see if I'm making a choice here. Yeah. I think that's what I wrote down.
I think that's what it's about. It's about the choice, right? We're not locusts. We're not going to get eaten if we stop and think about whether we want to go along with the group or not. The stakes are not that high.
Thank goodness.
Well, and I guess what's been running through my head is that peer pressure doesn't end in, grade 12, right? That it's all around in subtle ways, and like we've been talking about, the group pressuring and working together is, amazing and wonderful, and then sometimes less so, and
yeah, and just to be interested in that variability, right? Like when is it more or less? When do you notice it? When your peer pressure comment made me think of school pickup. I think that's such a nice way to watch togetherness and how people manage it. To watch parents interacting with one another.
Yeah.
I love watching teenagers, when they're all individuals, but in exactly the same way. They're like all rebelling, but it's interesting how your way of rebelling is exactly like, 6 of your friends. It's just so we think we're doing our own thing, and it's a function of of that togetherness. It just cracks me up.
In one of our classes the other day, they were saying that, that difference of being connected to your generation, and how I think someone mentioned that Plato made a remark about the next generation, ruining the world, and how to think about, how we can come connected to our generation and work to strive to be a little different in the next generation, and how there's reactivity. I think I see that as those forces playing out.
For millennia, clearly.
Yeah.
Are you saying I'm not allowed to make boomer jokes with my friends, Katie? Don't take that away from me.
Never.
Well, Kathleen,
just be ready for your kid to be making them about you.
Yes.
Love it.
Yeah. I was wondering, Kathleen, would you want to say what you've been researching for your new book and how it might relate to this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a chapter on sort of it's called How We Lose Ourselves. It's the first chapter in the book. And so just that that automatic borrowing of what's convenient, whether it's what the people closest to us are doing or believing, or people or riffraff on the internet, right? It's all around. And the higher the level of anxiety in the society, the more readily we kind of give and take answers. And so that was sort of part of the drive for writing the book, is just sort of addressing that and helping people think about, is there another way than needing to be the person giving the advice or needing to be the person taking the advice? What if I'm doing neither of those things? What does that mean? So yeah, that's what it's about.
Yeah, exciting.
Very timely.
Yeah. Good. Well, any other? Clearly we've figured it all out. We've said all the things in our 29 and a half minutes. Any other things that came to mind, or as we wrap up?
I don't think so.
Yeah, just appreciate the opportunity to keep thinking about these ideas.
We need a group cheer to to close it out. Just like, does Walmart still start every day with the group Walmart employee cheer? Is that?
Oh, I didn't know that was a thing. We need a Bowen theory cheer. There we go.
That we each come up with individually, and
I have to say, I drink my coffee some mornings from the mug that I got from the international conference, and it makes me so happy and makes me feel, Katie's got hers right now. Like, I just feel so connected, right? It's fascinating, right? This talisman, so to speak.
There you go.
Exactly. Well, thanks, Kathleen, for joining us today. It's great to hear your thoughts.
Thanks for having me.
It's going to make some
until next time
fangirl comment, but I will just allude to that
another time.
Not while we're being recorded. So good. And I want to thank our audience for listening and your interest in systems thinking. And my hope is that this episode has stirred your own thoughts as you go out into your relationships.
This podcast is produced by Living Systems, a nonprofit organization in Vancouver offering counseling and training programs in Bowen family systems theory across Canada.